Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Welcome to another episode of Greg Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and alongside me is Greg Gabriel. Greg, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited about the Combine that's coming up. A week from today it begins down in Indianapolis, so we'll talk about that.
Well, the workouts start a week from today.
The workouts start. So what happens prior to that?
Well, the players, I think, start coming in on Tuesday.
Okay.
So that if they do it the way they've always done it, the first group in is the offensive line. So on Wednesday, they go through their medicals and they may lift towards the end of the day.
Okay.
And they also, there's different psychological tests, et cetera, that they do. And then Thursday or Friday, I think they finally hit the field.
Mm-hmm.
But when's March 1st? Whenever March 1st is, that's the day the Combine starts.
Tuesday.
So that's the day it starts.
Coming up real soon. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what the folks at Hallis Hall are doing in preparation for that. I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah, and he said that right now, a lot of boards are in the process of being set and headed then to the Combine. The biggest thing that can impact their boards are conversations that they have with players, the physicals that they get, where player names can start coming off the board because of things they learn from conversations and physicals. You agree with that?
Yeah, to an extent, not totally. Most clubs have, not every club, but a lot of clubs, good high majority, have meetings leading up until about a week before the Combine starts. Now, the Combine's about a week later this year. It's usually the last week in February, and it's starting March 1st this year. So, but early in February, you have about 2 weeks of meetings. Most clubs have also met in December. And basically what you're doing is you're whittling down the board to get to a good number in which to work with for the last 2 months of the draft. A lot of times you're going to get rid of guys that aren't fit, say aren't character problems, or they just aren't schematically a fit for what you're trying to do, or just plain not good enough. And so you eliminate those names. What happens at the Combine, though, I mean, you don't have, except for the bowl games, especially with the underclassmen, you don't have verified measurables.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to get the verified measurables. You've got estimated height, weight, and speed on all those guys, and some of them are going to come in bigger or smaller, faster, slower. They're going to have a real good workout. They're going to have a terrible workout. That can influence your thinking a little bit, but you always got a makeup test, and the makeup test is the pro day.
Pro days, right?
So, if a guy, here's the thing: if a guy skips the combine as far as the workout,
Mm-hmm.
then he's got one day to prove himself, and that's the pro day. And if he bombs out on the pro day, then he's SOL. Okay, so, but if you bomb or have a poor workout at the combine, you got a makeup test at the pro day, and that can, bring your life back again, so to speak. You can raise you from the dead. We're getting near Easter, so we'll use some of these.
Resurrect you. There you go.
So, and there's interviews. I've been in interviews where we've eliminated guys.
Mm-hmm.
Where I remember there was a receiver, not going to mention the name, had some issues at the school he was at, and we got him in the room. And now, granted, 15 minutes isn't a long time, but when you get right to the point, he was pointing the finger at everybody else but the person that was the cause of the problem, which was himself.
Of course, usually that's
so, because he wasn't going to look at what the real problem was, we just eliminated him off the interview. And we've done that with other people. And then there's other guys who come in who just, knock it out of the park in that 15-minute thing. And then you go, wait a minute, well, let's go back and do some more tape on this guy. This guy's really an interesting guy.
Mm-hmm.
And go from there. So yeah, that can have an impact. When you look at a team like the Bears and versus a team that has been together, when you have the front office and the coaching staff has been together, it's a different scenario, because now, your coaching staff, which has just been put together in the last couple of weeks, they're just getting their list of players to cross-check. Mm-hmm. So not only are they looking at their own team and trying to decide who to keep. Now, that's probably done. They've done that, over the course of the last few weeks, decided who they like, who they don't like, whatever. But now they're going to get their cross-check on as far as positional players to watch. They'll do that at the combine. They'll do it if they allow private workouts this year. There's pro days. Last 2 years, we haven't had private workouts. So it'll be interesting to see if that takes place this year. I haven't seen anything one way or the other, whether it'll be allowed. Obviously, pro days are in the schedule, but whether you can go out and do a private workout, that remains to be seen. I hope they do, because they're very, very important, especially, if you send a coach out with quarterbacks, it's obviously important, but even with say guys like offensive linemen, you send your coach out, he spends a few hours with the guy. Not only does he get him in the classroom, get him on the board, see how he can learn and retain, but you're watching him do the workout. He's doing things specific to what you're going to be asking him to do. Once training camp opens, you see how he takes coaching. And there's been, like, when I worked very closely with Harry Heastan when he was here, and Harry'd come back and say, I don't want that guy. He just rubs me the wrong way. I don't think he'll fit in the room very well with the veterans that we got, or vice versa, to come back to the other guy. This guy's great. So, all that is part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get everything put together and come up with, a final board until the final couple weeks leading up to the draft, which makes me laugh. You see all these analysts and draftniks say, the Bears are going to take this guy in the such and such a round, or the Vikings are going to take this guy. They're guessing. They're throwing a dart at the wall because the teams don't know. You're always in a very fluid situation where you're trying to get more information, and the more information you have, the more intelligent your decision is or becomes. And so you keep things open, you keep things fluid. You can bring guys in until, the last few years, you haven't been able to bring guys in. Hopefully this year you can bring guys in. If that's the case, you can bring them in until a week before the draft. You got the 30 visit rule. You can go out and work out a guy day before the draft and go see him. So all that stuff is ongoing. I remember one time when I was with the Giants, we went back and worked out a guy 3 different times.
Just because you guys was it the physical stuff or more of the mental stuff that
combination of mental and physical?
Okay. And another thing, one of the things that you said there, a lot of things very interesting. One that really stuck out to me is the fact that you're also getting input from position coaches, and that they can sway you one way or another. For instance, you just said Harry Heaston said, I don't want that guy around. I don't feel good about him. So there wasn't anything in particular, perhaps from a physical standpoint. It was much more of the mental part that perhaps Harry was turned off by.
Right. And well, here's the thing, Aldo, is that, and I've said this before, you can never shove a player down a coach's throat. It isn't going to work. If the coach is adamant that he doesn't want a certain player, you can't draft him. I don't care how good he is. You can't draft him, because you've got to have that working relationship between coach and player. And if the coach has spent time with them and comes away saying, hey, I don't feel good about this guy, I can't work with him, then forget about him. Let somebody else take him.
Yeah.
And then, if the guy you study him. If the scouting department likes the guy and you study him and it becomes available in a trade or a waiver acquisition or something later on, maybe something's changed. Maybe you moved on from the coach and then you bring him in. So, everything's very, very fluid when it comes to scouting.
Yeah. The NFL had announced that they were going to keep the players down at the combine in a bubble. That did not go over really well, and I think they've now eliminated that rule. So it appears that there aren't going to be any of the players who have been invited. No one is going to deny the invitation. Do you know of any players who,
No, the number is down a little bit. From usually the number's about 335. It's about 324, 325 this year. And part of that means they don't have enough specialists, because if you've got a set number of players at each position usually going in. And so if the number's down a little bit, it usually means that they're short at a certain area because they just didn't feel those guys were qualified or good enough to be invited to the combine. Let me add this. There's, some people are of the opinion that if you get invited to the combine, guy's going to get drafted. That's the furthest thing from the truth. First of all, depending on the compensatory picks, and now you've got added compensatory picks if you hire or if you lose a minority coach to a head coaching position, or a minority front office guy to a general manager position, you pick up some compensatory picks over a 2-year period for losing that guy. So depending on how many compensatory picks there are in a draft, round figure, a draft is about 255 players,
Mm-hmm.
give or take. It might go up, depending on the compensatories. It could be 258, could be 253, but you can use that average of 255 and be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if there's 325 or 335 players invited to the combine, right off the bat, you got 78 guys that are at the combine that aren't getting drafted.
Yeah.
Okay, then every year, the number is 35. Average of 35 players who weren't invited to the combine get drafted, and some get drafted quite high.
Mm-hmm.
So add that to the previous number. Now it's really the real number is about 100 guys invited to Indy don't get drafted.
Mm-hmm. Jimmy K is saying that I've never understood this compensatory picks concept. And boy, I don't think anybody does.
Well, what's he talking about? Is he talking about free agents or with coaches in front office?
Well, I don't think anybody understands any of it.
Well, the league doesn't come out and tell you what the formula is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you're guessing, so, and they never have, because I think it's always changing. The teams don't even know what the hell the formula is.
It's nuts. I don't get that.
But there's a variety of things that go into the equation. So when you see, let's just say that Allen Robinson signs a contract somewhere and he's going to get $16 million a year. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're going to say, the Bears are going to get a third round compensatory. That is not true. On paper, theoretically, it's correct. But when it's all said and done, it's what the team signed as a whole in free agency. And it has to be players that are, unrestricted free agents, not street free agents. Mm-hmm. So if you cut a guy right now and you sign him, he's not, and another team signs him, that guy does not fall into the compensatory equation. So it's strictly UFAs, and it's what you signed minus what you lost, or what you lost minus what you signed. But then there's a difference between the two.
Okay.
So, the Bears could sign two lesser free agents at wide receiver, and you look at those two contracts versus a contract that A-Rod gets somewhere else, and in theory, they could negate, even though it's two versus one, it could negate the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And what further complicates the equation is it's still what happens in the season figures in play time and honors. Mm-hmm. So if the guy signs a big contract, you think, we're going to get a third round pick, but he doesn't play, or he gets hurt. Mm-hmm. Gets hurt the first week, doesn't play the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. Guess what? You don't get anything. Okay. So you got to wait until, it'll be next month before they tell you the compensatory picks from last year, because they take everything into consideration and then go from there. So I just get a kick out of seeing this stuff. They're going to get a 3 and a 5 or something like that. You don't know that. You don't know that till next year.
Right.
Jimmy, because everything, and it works for both teams. What you gained, what you lost, how they played, play time, did they get to the Pro Bowl, all sorts of things like that.
Right. Jimmy has a follow-up. He asks, why should the Bears get a compensatory pick if Allen Robinson signed for another team, for example? And so that is a good philosophical question, is why did the NFL come up with this compensatory pick idea for players when they leave a team? Their contract is done. They're a free agent. Why should there be compensatory picks awarded?
Because it's part of in order to give the teams had to get something, or ownership had to get something, because there was no free agency. Mm-hmm. Remember? And so then when free agency came about, they said, okay, well, if we're going to lose a real good player, we got to get something in return. Mm-hmm. But you're still not getting, theoretically, you could say an A-Rob's worth a second round or first round pick, but the highest, you're going to get on a compensatory as a third, and chances are you're not even going to get a third. Again, there's so many different things that come into that particular equation that you're just right now you're guessing.
Yeah, that's an excellent thought. Tony asked, do we get a first round compensatory pick for losing Trubisky? And
No.
I know he's kidding about that, but that is, it is weird. Are we going to get any compensatory pick for Trubisky?
No. It was he signed as a UFA. His contract was up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he would enter into the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, based on his contract, probably a seventh. But again, you got to take who did the Bears sign that were considered UFAs? Because remember, a street free agent doesn't count.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a date too. So they got to be signed by a certain date. So anybody signed after that date doesn't enter into the equation either. A lot of times teams wait until after, especially with certain guys that, aren't going to break, you're not going to have to break the bank. So to help you with your compensatory pick calculations, you're going to wait to sign some guys.
Okay. Makes sense. Let me get back to the combine here because of the drills. The thinking, the prevailing thought over the years that I've, as I understand it, is that, these drills don't really mean a whole hell of a lot. It's the tape from game tape and their college game tape that means the most. But let's go over the drills and tell me what value, if any, they have. The 40-yard dash, the vertical jump, the 20-yard shuttle, the broad jump, the 3-cone, and bench press. Are there any particular drills there that you look at and say, all right, I want to see, definitely you want to see what a wide receiver and running backs are going to do in the 40-yard dash. There's value.
Now, don't forget you got to look at it that they're training for this. They've been training for the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
By the time they get to the combine, working on starts, working on speed drills. So is it a true indicator of their speed? Okay. And that's where the tape comes in, because when you're looking at tape, you're always putting in play speed. I know when I worked for the Giants and when I was a director with the Bears, we had a little box that the scouts had to fill in play speed. So that's an estimated speed. You can say, watch this guy in tape, say he plays 4.55. And then all of a sudden he runs 4.38. Well, he doesn't play 4.38. So you've got to check that and say, and then you go, sometimes when there's a big difference, you go back and you look at tape, and you say, okay, well, let's see what's the truth. And it can work the other way around too. There's a guy that, runs 4.7 and a perfect example, Lance Briggs. Ran 4.77, 4.78, something like that. But he played 4.55. And part of that was because of his instincts. So it works both ways. The guys can play faster than they time or slower than they time. And it's all part of the whole process of and experience tells you a lot with that. You can't just look at the numbers. But numbers that are important, obviously the 40 is important. Now, the one thing that's nice about the combine is that each position group is working out at the same place on the same day at the same time.
Same conditions.
So, yes. And so you've got apples to apples when comparing player A to player B. Okay. And you assume that, they've been training for the last 6 to 8 weeks, so they should be in good condition. So from that standpoint, it's pretty good. Now, I always look at the vertical and the broad jump because that's explosiveness. And generally speaking, a guy that runs fast is going to have a good vertical jump and a good standing long jump. And if they don't, there's something missing. Like I've seen some guys running the 4.3s and they only got a 33 or 34-inch vertical. Something's missing there because he should be, because of that speed, the jump should be better. Or let's say he jumps 9'8" in the standing long jump. And with that speed, he should be jumping a lot farther than that. So you've got to compare and check those things to see if everything coincides. The 20-yard shuttle, here's one thing with the combine. The combine, all these drills, they've been doing these same drills forever. And the combine started in January 1986. The only drill that's new from all those is the 3-cone, and that's probably 20 years old now. And because they used to do it like a box drill and it was useless. But they become learned drills. And what I mean by that is that when they're at these prep camps getting ready for the combine, they're doing 20-yard shuttles and 3-cones every freaking day to get their steps down and their technique down. So is it real? So you've got to compare your tape. You look at those numbers and say, yeah, I really done something really well, but I don't see it on tape.
One of isn't there a danger in having players work out in a manner that they normally don't do for football? For instance, the story with Kevin White is that he may have suffered that micro fracture on his shin working out for the combine. He's a workout warrior. He was working out so hard. So isn't there a danger involved in having some of these, players prepare for some of these drills, or is that a fallacy?
I mean, yeah, anything can happen. I mean, I can get hurt going to the gym.
Don't go to the gym then.
Yeah, I mean, so
I get you.
That can happen. So what? If he's hurt, then don't work out, and then wait for your pro day.
Okay, fair enough. Todd McShay says that one of the things he looks at is the broad jump because the top broad jumpers and offensive linemen are usually end up being offensive tackles in football. Not the majority of them, but he's saying the top broad jump numbers for offensive linemen, those guys are usually better made for the tackle position. You agree with that?
No, not at all. Because what if a guy's 6'2" and he jumps to 9'5"?
Ah, interesting.
Okay, he's still too short. It's too short to play. What the broad jump tells you, and it's a vertical and the broad jump, is lower body explosiveness. Okay, and lower body power. And so, like I said, a lot of these things coincide. And generally speaking, if a guy runs fast, he's going to jump far. And he runs slow, he isn't going to jump very good. Now, there are exceptions, but you got to see. And some guys are quicker than fast. So you might see real quick. They don't run good in the 40, but when they do the shuttles, the 20-yard shuttle and the 3-cone, they blaze through them. Nate Vasher, perfect example. Nate Vasher was under 4 seconds in the 20-yard shuttle, under 7 seconds in the 3-cone, but he never ran fast.
Interesting. Ended up being a pretty good player.
Yep.
Stephen Paella benched 49 reps at the combine, and he never really had.
Was it 49 or 44? I thought it was 44, but doesn't matter. He did a bunch.
Yeah, he had the most of that particular combine, and I think he's still like in the top 5 for reps.
Right.
So, I mean, and I was so excited. Oh, I want this guy for the team. I want the Bears, and the Bears drafted him. But he never had a career that really lived up to at least my expectations. I thought he was going to be a great one, but didn't happen.
That means he's a weight room warrior.
That's right.
But what's he do on tape? And sometimes you've got to be careful because sometimes these guys that put up the big numbers in the bench got short arms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're not pushing the weight as far as a guy with long arms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that might, to the common man, that might not sound like a whole lot.
No,
but trust me, it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get, and here's a fallacy. Football power is not coming from the bench press. Yeah, that helps you with your punch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it's the bench is your chest strength.
Mm-hmm.
Your power, especially for offensive and defensive linemen, is in your hips and your butt.
Mm-hmm.
And that snap of your hips.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, you're looking at linemen and you want to see, body types. And do they have a big butt, wide hips versus a narrow frame? Because a narrow frame guy is not going to have the power, especially with linemen, that a big wide body guy does.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Englewood says, let's not forget the prospect that jumped out of the pool to show explosiveness. Yeah, who was that? And wasn't he drafted?
Third round pick? We took the guy in the third round. But it was the third round pick or fourth round pick.
What was his name? Oh, was that Justin Gilbert?
Gilbert, yeah.
Okay, I remember him. All right. So
from the standpoint of athleticism, it's an incredible feat.
Mm-hmm. It sure is. It sure is.
That had nothing to do with drafting him.
Mm-hmm. So you guys relied on game tape, and yeah, okay.
And if I recall correctly, the defensive line coach even worked him out.
Mm-hmm. There are players who, after the combine or even during the combine, all of a sudden, the TV commentators and social media and all of this guy.
Oh, yeah, he jumped up 2 rounds.
Yes, exactly. He's now a possible.
You know what happened? And 2 weeks later, he's back to where he was before the combine.
That's right.
That is one of the biggest. That's the fallacy of analysts. What you call it? This guy just became a first round pick. Yeah. And then wait on April 28th or whenever the draft is, he goes in the 3rd round because that's where he's supposed to go.
It's just for the audio podcast people. The reason I was laughing is because Greg made the international gesture for jerk-offs. That is amazing. The buzz that some of these guys get, for running a fast 40 or doing something on the broad jump. But is there any legitimacy at all to the fact that there can be some performances down at the combine where all of a sudden coaching staff, scouting staffs are saying, "No, wait a minute, I might have to go back and look at game tape."
And that's a good point because remember I said a little while ago, you've got estimates on a guy based on what you saw on tape. So when the guy works out, he's either going to perform to what you thought he was going to do.
Right.
He's going to do better. He's going to be worse. Okay. If it's worse, you got a problem. Okay. And if it's better, then what that means, and especially if it's significantly better, that means I better go back and look at more tape to make sure I'm right. And it becomes not going to say a red flag, but it becomes a flag in that you've got to go back and look at tape and make sure that your grades are right on the guy because the athleticism was so good that you didn't see some of it. But guys just don't automatically jump up. When that happens, you make a mistake and the guy ends up busting. Because you don't play football in shorts.
Mm-hmm. Never will. Let's get to some of the questions before we get to our next topic that I want to cover with you. The factor, he asks, how do you think Ryan and Matt will split free agency and draft power I think you've said this a number of times. This is Ryan Poles' show. He's the general.
Well, it's a contractual thing. It's written in your contract.
Mm-hmm.
So, generally speaking, and this holds true for most general managers, they are responsible for the 53-man roster. They have final say. The coach is responsible for who plays and who his coaching staff is.
And it's highly, highly unlikely Eberflus could have negotiated control over the roster. He's just too young of a coach, doesn't have that power to negotiate something like that. This is strictly
the guy who has that tag.
Mm-hmm.
He's the boss. End of discussion.
Gotcha.
Okay, so and I'm going to. And who was hired first?
Ryan Poles.
Okay, he's got the tag.
Mule has a question. I agree with this. Do you believe the draft should increase to 10 rounds? I hate 7 rounds. Richard Dent was discovered in the 8th round by the Chicago Bears. Why did they go to a 7-round draft? People love the draft too. From a TV standpoint, it just makes sense to go to 10 rounds and maybe expand it another day for TV ratings. Your thoughts?
Reality is it is 8 rounds because of the compensatory picks.
Oh, well, that's a good point.
Okay, so just not everybody gets that compensatory pick.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the numbers, what's 7 times 32? And you're going to find out that it's a lot less than 255.
Mm-hmm.
So in reality, it's an 8-round draft. When I started in the league, it was a 12-round draft. Why it's a 7-round draft now has all been negotiated as part of the collective bargaining agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to really give the undrafted free agents a little bit of power on where they're going to go, that they can choose their team. And that's, but there's still a set money. Every team's got the same pool in which to sign undrafted free agents. It's how you use that pool.
Right.
Okay. So, and there's been changes in how contract and what they've done in recent years with contracts is, you only got X. Let's say the number's $100,000. That means you got $100,000 to divvy up in bonus money
Mm-hmm.
between all the guys that you sign as undrafted free agents.
Mm-hmm.
But what they've done now to increase that pool, so to speak, or go around the pool, is they guarantee part of the first year contract.
Mm-hmm.
They might guarantee $100,000. So if a guy makes a team or he doesn't make the team, he's still getting $100,000 of that salary that, he's always the rookie minimum salary, whatever that is now. Mm-hmm. But you'll see it when a guy gets cut in training camp or at the final cut down, it'll show on the waiver wire, partially guaranteed contract.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, what I have seen is that guys that have that partial guarantee end up on the practice squad.
Gotcha.
Because you're already paying them.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so next question is from Greg. Andreas, do you, Greg, have any input on Noah Dawkins, the new Bears linebacker that was just signed? I will say this, that
you're a camp guy.
Well, let me tell you what Robert Salal, is that how you pronounce his name? The Jets head coach, Robert Salal. I apologize. Anyways, he said this was back in at the end of camp last year. He said, I think Noah Dawkins is doing a really, really nice job. He has done a 180 since the OTAs. He's extremely detailed. He's getting extra meeting time. And when he's on it, the kid can flat out fly. This guy is only 25 years old. he could be one of those special teams sleepers, for lack of a better way of putting it. So he might be a little bit more than a camp guy.
Well, yeah, and they didn't sign him to a future contract, did they?
I guess not. Touche.
So until he proves different, which he will have that opportunity,
No,
he's a camp guy.
okay. Winston Robbins asked about running backs in the first round. Do you think that there should be any running backs ever again drafted in the first round?
Well, I mean, it's really changed because, the year we took said 3 went in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then back then, running backs were a big position.
Yeah, huge.
But the way offense is being played has changed. And then you look at the shelf life of a running back.
Mm-hmm.
There's not too many that get a second contract.
Yeah.
Or a second big contract.
Right.
When you look at the percentage. And so, yeah, from that standpoint, unless the guy's really special.
A transcendent type player, right?
Yeah, unless the guy's really special, I don't believe he should go in the first round anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You got to take that. You can. Here's the term you use: value of position.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you want to take guys that the value of the position is high in the first round, and there's always going to be exceptions,
mm-hmm.
and the exceptions are for guys that are special.
Mm.
That's why so many damn quarterbacks go in the first round. It's the most important position, and you're swinging for the fences half the time.
Mm.
Now, it'll be interesting to see how many go this year because this year's class isn't close to last year's class talent-wise. There's some interesting guys, but how many will go in the top 10 and in the first round overall versus last year where 5 went in the top 16?
Good question. We've got breaking news, and it's courtesy of Taurine Whitfield, and I just confirmed this on Patrick Finley's Twitter account. Ryan Pace is joining the Atlanta Falcons as a senior personnel executive, and again, that's per Patrick Finley. Thank you, Taurine Whitfield, for sharing that with us. What do you think about that Pace going to Atlanta?
Well, he's got a relationship with their GM. That GM came from New Orleans. Ryan Pace was.
It's all about relationships.
Damn straight. And then part of it is I think he's still under contract for another year. So know what it's costing Atlanta?
Mm-hmm.
Besides nothing. They got to pay him something.
Yeah.
But they can sign him to a contract for $50,000, and the Bears that 50 offsets what the Bears owe them, and the Bears paying the rest.
Gotcha.
So if you sign him for $800,000, that is the Bears have significantly less money to have to shell out to him for the remainder of that contract. But generally speaking, you sign him to as cheap a contract as you can, and you let the other team pay for it.
Excellent. Let's hope that he got a nice big fat contract over at Atlanta. But clearly he was a bargain. Bear Truth 9, the former Chicago police officer, asked a good question. He says, what are common mistakes you learned from that helped you with your process as being a scouting director and when those days when you were a scout? How much do you think you improved from when you started till now? I'm guessing you learned every day, right?
It's experience, I guess, is the best way to describe it. Mm-hmm. And he was a cop. What he learned on the street?
Yeah, right.
It's the same thing. You're going over. You see early in your career, you see guys, and you can see raw traits, but you don't necessarily know how to translate it to the pro game because you just don't have that experience. And so it's just that overall knowledge of how the whole process works.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
And the one thing that experience has taught me is that football character is way up here.
Mm-hmm.
When you're drafting guys. And I've said this before, but I'll repeat it. Guys that bust generally don't bust because they can't play. They bust because they don't have football character. And when I say football character, it's their passion for the game, work ethic, etc. Desire to be as good as they can be. And Josh Allen is a perfect example. His football character is off the charts because there's not a person in this world that thought that Josh Allen was going to turn out to be the quarterback he is when he got drafted. There's a lot of doubters, including me.
Interesting. Let's turn our attention now to some of the Bears player personnel decisions, and we're going to focus on the defensive side of the ball. And I want to thank the people over at The Athletic. I stole this from a recent post. I think it was posted this morning. They go through all of the defensive positions and talk about which players are under contract and which players might get cut. So let's start over at the Bears cornerback position. These are the guys that are under contract for 2022. Jalen Johnson, Kendall Vildor, Duke Shelley, Thomas Graham, and Xavier Crawford. I think you and I will agree that Xavier Crawford probably will be retained and just show up to be a camp body, but hopefully not on the 53-man roster at the end of the season. What are your thoughts on these guys under contract?
I think every one of those guys will be in camp. Will all of them be on the team? No.
Yeah. No value in cutting anyone right now to save pennies.
Unless they there's nobody sitting there that's got this outrageous contract. Jalen Johnson's on a rookie deal. Kendall Vildor's on a rookie deal. Duke Shelley's on the end of his rookie deal. If anybody's going to be gone, it would be, in my opinion, Duke Shelley, but that is going to be a coaching staff decision, and because they've evaluated the tape of these guys, and go back to Coach Fluss' statement on the three most important positions in his scheme, and it's the three technique, the will linebacker, and the nickel corner. So, and Duke Shelley can't play outside; he's too damn small. So, does he cut the ice to play or to be what Coach Fluss is looking for as a nickel corner? And if he's not, then he could be a guy that they don't even bring to camp.
Okay. Let's turn our attention. Oh, by the way, some people are saying in the chat room that Xavier Crawford is not under contract for 2022. And I did a quick check over at Spotrac, and apparently he's not. So, maybe
cross his ass off too.
I love it. Let's look at
some of these guys. Some of these guys that are free agents will be re-signed. They'll probably go through free agency. Some will sign over the next 2 weeks before the league year starts. But that's going to be that's going to be the most interesting thing. People could say, I think the Bears are going to go after this, and this. You know what? We don't know what the hell they're going to do because we don't know how they're prioritizing things. You got a new front office and a new coaching staff. And so you've got nothing to go on from history like you had with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. So the important thing to watch is what they do in the first couple of weeks of free agency. And Ryan Poles is on record as saying he doesn't believe in the first wave. Well, the first wave is generally the first few days where the big money is spent.
Right.
And then, he wants more reasonable guys. And most successful people believe in that theory because you end up overspending with that first wave too often, and you don't always get your money back. So, and looking at the Bears, you look at the number of players they got under contract, how much money they got in the cap. I can't see them going crazy on a free agent. Like, if Devontae Adams is around, they're going to sign him. No. Is Williams from the Chargers, is he available? Going to sign him? No. They got, they're going to go after guys that are more reasonable that they think have a lot of upside.
Yeah.
And go from there. But the interesting thing will be what they do. You can figure out what they're going to do in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, I always say the draft and free agency go hand in hand. You can figure out what they're going to do in the draft by what happens by, say, the 1st of April.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in that first 3 weeks of free agency, more so probably the first 2 weeks, because then you're going to see, you know, what the needs are, and then you're going to see okay, this is what they've signed in free agency. Now, here's what they'll probably do in the draft, because if they sign 2 veteran wide receivers, I can't see them taking a wide receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if they sign a couple offensive linemen or a corner and an offensive lineman in free agency, but don't touch receivers, then you can think, you know what, they're going after receivers in the draft. So that's how it's going to work. So, you know, don't even look at a mock draft now, because it's totally meaningless.
I am so with you on that. Mock drafts now are not only a waste of time to participate in, but even more a waste of a time to read them. Somebody has
it's like, you know, when I was doing that stuff, I refused to do them.
Yeah, good for you. It's just
I said, no, I'm not doing it. We need a mock draft. No, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. First mock drafts you should read are after free agency.
I do one. I always do one a couple days before the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah. I know people do,
it's
like
a waste of time.
Dozens. It's like, what are you doing? I guess, if, you know, for those non-professionals, it's fun to do a mock draft, because then you do research on certain players and you get familiar with guys. But in terms of the professionals, the Todd McShay and has just released his newest mock draft, I don't care. It doesn't mean anything because we haven't gone through the free agency period, which is then when you can start making a determination about team needs and so forth.
All it does is tell you who they think are priority players.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know, 1st round talent, 2nd round talent, or whatever. And it's still, until you get done with the combine, they're meaningless, because the most important part of the combine is the medical.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be guys that that the draft analysts have as 1st round picks are going to flunk the medical.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're going to have a big character flaw that the general public doesn't know about, but the teams find out about.
Mm. We have more breaking news, Greg. This is a busy day over at with the Bears. They have announced, I am Scox, thank you for this. They have just announced that Matt Feinstein has been hired as the Director of Football Administration. Do you know Matt? And tell us what the job is. What does a Director of Football Administration do?
I don't know Matt.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to Google him or we're talking. They don't have a cap guy as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was under the understanding that if they didn't hire a guy, that Cliff Stein would be doing, who is, was for years the cap guy and the contract guy, and now he's the legal counsel for the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
That through the draft, until they could bring somebody in, that Cliff would be doing the contracts. Now, if this guy expertise is the cap, then there's your new contract guy.
Okay. Yeah, there's not a lot of information on Matt, but we'll get it. We'll have it for our next show. And I want to jump to the next position, and that is linebackers. These are the players under contract for 2022. It's Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan, Caleb Johnson, and now this new kid that they brought in, Noah Dawkins. So you and I talked just very briefly before the show. It seems to me like Danny Trevathan would be an obvious candidate for being cut, but you somewhat disagreed a little bit.
Well, I only disagree because of the way his contract is.
Okay.
There's no cap savings in in cutting him because of they've restructured his contract before. In fact, they take an extra like $3.5 million cap hit.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, he'd be if they don't see him as a fit within this scheme. And again, this is where the coaching staff is going to come in. They're going to watch tape and they're going to say, he's a fit or he's not a fit. We want him, we don't want him, or whatever. And they're not going to sit and tell us.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see it. But to me, he would be, Laz says a $5 million hit. No, it's $3 million something, because I looked it up before the start of the show.
Right.
And another guy said, I'd like Ogletree back. I agree with that. I think Ogletree is a fit within this scheme, but what's he going to cost?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you got to be reasonable with that. Of the names up there, Noah Dawkins is a camp guy. Yeah, he's got some talent, but obviously the Jets didn't like him enough to give him a futures contract. The name that jumps out at me in there is he got hurt during the year. He's a special teams terror, played good in the preseason. It was Caleb Johnson.
Yeah.
He and in this scheme, he might be a pretty damn good player. That could be your Mike linebacker right there.
Really?
Yeah.
Very interesting, Caleb.
But that's me. That's a guy I just like. He's got great instincts.
Yeah, you've been praising him since the preseason games of last season. So
no, since the day they signed him.
Okay. And let's move our attention now to safeties. There's currently only one safety under contract, and that's Eddie Jackson. And people have been talking for weeks, months about dropping Eddie Jackson. Seems highly unlikely.
Yeah, ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. And there's probably
let me get into the thing here. I know you lose my.
No, that's okay.
If you drop Eddie Jackson, it costs you. There's no cap savings, and it's going to cost you additional $3.5 million.
Yeah. So you're almost obligated to bring him to camp. Now, trading him might have some value. You still would be out that $3.5 million.
Right.
But if you bring in something substantial, but what is the likelihood of that? I mean, other teams are seeing the same thing we see in Eddie Jackson, is that he's not the same player he was in 2018.
I thought Eddie Jackson the second half of the year played pretty good.
Yeah, he seemed to realize, hey, there's going to be a new coaching staff. I better put some good stuff on tape.
Yeah, so you can't get rid of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You got to line up and play. Like I said, there's one guy under contract. Whether they bring any of the other guys back, that remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obviously an area of need for veteran free agency. They don't have enough draft picks to say it's I think that's, you're going to have to get that one taken care of in free agency.
Okay.
Or re-sign some of the guys that are, out on the street that they're letting go, that are out of contract, depending on what they find out their market value is.
Hair Bear asked the question, could you see Eddie Jackson as the slot corner? Because Eddie Jackson talked about how much he liked playing that position because he's closer to the ball, there's more action and stuff. What do you think?
No. He's a safety. I don't think he has he started off as a corner at Alabama. They moved him to safety. He doesn't have that flat out speed and suddenness that you need, especially at the slot corner.
Mm. And aren't slot corners more involved in tackling than free safeties?
They can be, but you've got to be, the average slot guy, and it changes. A lot of times what you do, what you'll see, and Green Bay did this,
mm-hmm.
was if you've got a weak slot corner,
mm-hmm.
you'll take your one of your outside guys, and then on a lot of passing downs, have them play in the slot. So you got a strong point on a weak point.
Mm-hmm.
Follow what I'm saying? So it becomes a chess game.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, Eddie Jackson is, and Jimmy K says he's pretty good safety. I agree, and I think he's a free, not a strong. And the free safety is important. He's got great ball skills. He's just got to get. I think this whole staff will do wonders for Eddie Jackson. You look back and you see just some of the stuff that was going on, and guys weren't getting better. What was the problem?
I think we all want to know what the problem is and how can it get fixed very fast. What about Adrian Amos? He's a free agent with the Green Bay Packers. You think that might help cure Eddie Jackson's problems, bringing back that safety? I know I was so displeased when the Bears let him go, period. And the fact that he went to Green Bay made it even
worse.
Well,
they didn't want to pay him. And right. Green Bay, they didn't, and Green Bay came up with some big money. Mm-hmm. Now, is he still worth what he got from Green Bay? I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he got a boatload of money from Green Bay.
Yeah.
But he's starting to age now. Mm-hmm. What's he, 8 years in the league?
That sounds right. Let me find out what his age is very quickly. He is 28 years old. April 29th is his birthday, so he'll be 29. April
okay,
29th.
Well, I'm not paying a 29-year-old $1 gazillion.
Yeah.
So you got to be wise with your money.
Right.
Okay, they've got a lot of needs,
mm-hmm. and
you can't go crazy on any one position. You gotta. I think they've got to, go in these second tier guys and younger guys that they think got a lot of upside,
mm-hmm.
and that's not going to cost them an arm and a leg.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to our next position group, and that is interior defensive line. That should be IDL. Eddie Goldman, Kyrie's Tonga, Angelo Blackson, Mario Edwards. Those guys are all under contract for 2022, and lots of questions in the chat room. What should we do with Eddie Goldman?
Personally, I think Eddie can play the nose in this scheme because he's not you're not a true nose. They probably want Eddie to be just a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get into his contract here. Bear with me.
Some money involved.
Eddie Goldman, they save $6.6 million by there's dead money. There's $5.1 million in dead money, but they save $6.6 million.
Wow.
So, that could very well be a possibility mm-hmm. that they let him go. Blackson, I think, can play nose in this because it's not, he showed enough last year that he could be a pretty good player. But is he a fit for this scheme? From what I've seen, I think he is. Mm-hmm. Then Henderson, in my opinion, can play the 3 technique. But I want to, be interested. What I think of what the coaching staff thinks are two different things. Mm-hmm. I want to know, what they think of Khalil.
Mm-hmm.
Or not Khalil.
Kyrie's Tonga.
No, not Kyrie's Tonga. Bilal Nichols.
Oh, Bilal Nichols, yes, because he's free agent.
Is he a guy they bring back? Because I know he can play the 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the 3 is very, very important in this
game.
Defense. And so is there another guy out there that they think can play it better than him? Or do they re-sign Bilal Nichols?
Mm-hmm.
And then, we're going to find out the answer to this stuff in
very quickly.
3 weeks.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, Jimmy K is right. Adrian Amos is not a free agent. The reason I made that mistake is because there's a lot of talk that the Packers might drop him because of the salary cap issues that they have. They are somewhere upwards of $35 million in the hole. So
they were They were over $50 million a couple of days ago. They've restructured 2 contracts, and that saved them 13 to 14 million. So they're still around 40, maybe a little, but just remember this, when you restructure contracts like that, you still got to, it comes back to get you. If it's not getting, okay, all you're doing is part of the problem the Bears have now is you're throwing money into the future. You're paying a bonus money and it's amortized now over the rest of the contract. The amount of money the guy gets this year does not change. What changes is how he's getting paid. Instead of getting paid salary, he's getting paid his bonus, and because his bonus is amortized.
Right. Tony, the pod boss asks if the best defensive tackle 3-tech in the draft is Devontae Wyatt, and he's available at pick number 39. Should the Bears take him, given the importance of that 3-tech? And let's say they address, some of the other needs the team has, like wide receiver and free agency. Can you see the Bears going 3-tech with their second round pick, which is their first pick of the draft?
Ask me after free agency.
Okay.
Because again, I'm not coming off of that.
No.
What they do in free agency is going to tell you what they're going to do in the draft. What you can say that now. Well, that's the best guy, so we'll take him in the draft. Well, if you re-sign Bilal Nichols, why would you take him in the draft?
Right. Exactly.
Or if you sign a veteran in free agency. So the draft right now is meaningless. To say, should we draft be patient, wait and see what they do in free agency. Like I say, I've been saying all along, and I could be totally wrong. I think they're going to try to sign 2 mid-priced veteran wide receivers that know how to play them. And the one that I keep mentioning is Lazard, and the key to Lazard is what's his tender going to be?
Right.
And if he's tendered as just right of your first refusal, I can almost guarantee he's going to be a Bear. Now, if he's tendered a second or a third, then it becomes iffy, because then you're saying, can I get a better receiver in the second or third round than what he gives?
What about Marquez Valdez-Scantling? You've talked about him in the past. Are you high on him too as a potential?
Yeah, he made like $2.2 million last year. He's a free agent, and then there's 2 with Kansas City that I like. I haven't looked at everybody's list, but there's Robinson and Pringle with Kansas City are interesting guys. Pringle's a little older; he's like 28. But he really came on last year, and here's one thing to look at. Green Bay, for the most part, except for Reggie Cobb, had big receivers. So is that what Getsy's going to be looking for? Now, Mooney obviously isn't a big receiver, but he can run, and he's proven to be pretty good. But you look at their top 5, they're all big guys.
Yep. There was a good column by Gene Chamberlain, SportsIllustrated.com. He noted that like 8 out of the 10 receivers the Packers had in camp last year, the majority of them were like over 6'1" and 210 pounds. They like their big wide receivers. And on the offensive line, they like their smaller offensive linemen under 300 pounds or around 300 pounds, guys that can run around a lot. So we'll see if the Bears offensive linemen currently under contract, if they're asking guys like Cody Whitehair and others to lose some weight because they want them.
Cody Whitehair is only about 310 to begin with.
Right.
But and it's my understanding they're going to play zone. You can play with bigger guys in a zone scheme, because you don't necessarily have to do all that pulling and play in space. We'll see.
Interesting. All right, the last position group we'll look at, again, we're just dealing with the defense here, is the edge players. And these are the guys the Bears have under contract for next season: Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Travis Gibson, Jeremiah Atoshu. I would think all of these guys are going to be retained, and it's too expensive to, trading Khalil Mack would just be detrimental to the cap.
You can't do it.
Can't do it, right? So.
Right.
And Robert Quinn, you can do it, but he's got 1 year left on his deal. I like the idea of bringing back Mack and Quinn for this 4-3 defense and letting them do what they do best, get after the quarterback.
Right. And the two young guys, Ochu, actually, before he got hurt, was playing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a good rotational player. And Travis Gibson is a guy that just keeps getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Played 2 years. When he got more play time when Mac got hurt, and he put up some pretty good numbers.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff there. And then finally, I want to end the show talking about what Bill Polian said about the Chicago Bears a couple of weeks ago, saying that there were only 6 to 8 blue chip players on this Bears roster currently, and that the prevailing thought throughout NFL circles is that teams need anywhere between 10 to 12 or so blue chippers to be truly competitive teams. So I wanted to ask you, who are the blue chippers on this roster right now?
Well, number one, I don't necessarily agree with Bill on that 10 to 12, because in my opinion, maybe what he considers a blue and what I consider a blue are two different things.
Yeah. Okay.
To me, a blue is a guy who's on the verge of being a Pro Bowl type player,
Mm-hmm.
or got that type of talent.
Mm-hmm.
And I said when you define certain grades, you got to think you win because of the guy or you win with the guy. Well, a true blue is you win because of him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on that, going through the Bears roster, I don't disagree that they only got about 6. I think Roquan Smith, Johnson, the corner,
Mm-hmm.
David Montgomery, I think is a blue running back.
I would agree.
Darnell Mooney he's right on the verge of being a blue.
Okay.
Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn.
That's it. So you got 6.
Okay, but you got guys who got a chance to be a blue, but they're not under contract. Bilal Nichols. A-Rob was a blue wide receiver.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Ogletree is really a red. He's not a blue. And Komet, I think, has got a chance to be a blue Y. Mm-hmm. Right now he's a red. Mm-hmm. Cody Whitehair's a red. Daniels is a red. Goldman is, when he's on top of his game, is a red. Eddie Jackson's a red. But guys who got a chance to become really good and get to that high red, low blue area are Travis Gibson, Jenkins, Borum, and of course, Justin Fields. Mm-hmm. But it's how do they develop?
Right.
We don't have the answer to that yet.
Right. Do you think it's possible that we can determine if Justin Fields is a blue chipper by this season, by the 2022 season, like midway through the end of the season, whatever?
Maybe. I mean, it depends how he develops. He's got to learn. Don't forget now, he's got to learn a whole new scheme. So it's the terminology. It's like being a rookie all over again, because the terminology is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And how quickly he adapts to that. And then, I've watched, because I'm assuming it's going to be an offense very similar to what Green Bay does.
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay, if you watch, Aaron Rodgers checks down a ton.
Yeah. Yeah.
A ton. I mean, obviously, he takes his shots,
mm-hmm.
but he's really, really good at taking what's there
mm-hmm.
and taking that check down. A lot of times those check downs aren't 3 and 4, they're 7 and 8.
Right. Because those guys can run after the catch.
Right. And some end up being first downs.
Yeah.
Even though it might be his third read.
Yeah. Brett Favre was the same way. Amon Green was good for 70, 80 catches, maybe more than that. I'd have to go back, but I remember Favre checking down the Green tons and tons. Lots of discussion in the chat room about how to define the blue chipper. We heard and I got to go back. I got to go to Jimmy K here because he says, I look at a blue chip player as someone who is top 5 at his position. And that's the way I remember the great Joe Bushbaum over at Pro Football Weekly when I was a kid reading his scouting reports. I think that's how he defined it too, but you don't quite define it that way, right?
No, it's to me, it's a guy you win because of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but how many players do you have on your team that you win because of that player?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
and there's a big difference. Just listen to the definition: win because of, win with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. Great stuff. All right. Next week, Greg, I am thinking we take the week off. We collect all sorts of information with the combine and then come back the week after, which is, I'm going to look at my Chicago Bears calendar. By the way, did I show you my Chicago Bears calendar? Let me go bigger screen here. For the month of February, they have Charles Leno. This is a 2022 calendar. They have Charles Leno for February. And then as I get into March, they have Anthony Miller. And then as I get into
somebody in that marketing department screwed up.
Look at this. That's not Jim McMahon. That's Nick Foles for April. And then in May, they start getting into some good news with Cole Kmet. But anyways, in terms of our show, I'm thinking that we might be back here if God wills us to the 7th week from Monday. Is that 7th? Yeah.
So right after the combine.
Right after the combine. So if that works for you,
is the last day of the combine Sunday or Monday?
I think it's. Whoa, that's a good point. Let me do a quick
Monday.
search there. Combine dates.
It's the 7th.
The 7th. So that is a Monday. So
That's
you want
right.
to maybe do a show on?
And that's the day DBs work.
Okay, so let's do a show on Tuesday the 8th. Why don't we pencil that in with an eraser if necessary? Handy.
Pencil in like you're going to send me that stuff?
I am in the middle of it. I am very.
Yeah.
His name is Greg Gabriel. You can catch him on Twitter. He's a great Twitter follower. Man, oh man, if you want to engage with Greg on opinions and evaluations and so forth, then you should be following him at Greg Gabe, Gabe, the last 4 letters. Greg Gabe.
Just before we go,
please.
You see, like Florio and some of these people are pushing that Fox or Amazon may go after McVay to be an analyst.
Yes.
He isn't leaving coaching yet.
There's no way. There's no way. Unless they're going to offer him $25 million a year to be an analyst, I don't think he would even entertain it.
Well, I don't know what he's making, but first of all, it's a passion for him.
Mm-hmm.
He enjoys it. Mm-hmm. So why are you going to stop? I tweeted out yesterday, said, Aikman's going to ESPN. That means Louis Riddick gets screwed. I wasn't huge. I think Riddick and Greasy did a really good job. I'm not a Greasy fan. I can't stand the guy, from when he was here. Mm-hmm. But as an analyst, he's not that bad. But I like Louis. I think he does a good job because he knows and understands the game.
I agree.
So he's going to be pushed out. But I don't think Troy Aikman is that good anymore.
I agree 100%.
To get 17. And here's what happens. When Romo first got his analyst job, he was, as a rookie, he was the best. And why? Because he was doing tape work during the week for the game he had that Sunday and studied it like he was preparing for a game as a player. Right. And if you recall, there'd be times when the offense would come up in a certain formation. He'd tell you exactly what the play was going to be because he knew them that well.
Yeah.
Because he could tell by formation, down and distance, that exactly what they're going to do. Aikman doesn't do that. I think Aikman is very, very average. They're looking for the name,
Yep.
but to me, Aikman, Greg Olson, far better.
Yes, he's a rising star.
Troy Aikman. And Olson's going to move up the chart there. He's a rising star, but these guys are good. Guys like Olson are good because they do the prep work. They do the tape work. These other guys, they start making 10, 12, $14 million a year. And then they got the money and they get lazy and they don't do the prep work.
I'm with you 100%. And, we've talked about, some of these bloggers, how they come up with stuff, they speculate and they say, I'm hearing from sources. Yeah, you just came up with that. And it really,
and I'm the source.
Yes, exactly. Then not you, Greg, but them.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. This sounds like a good idea.
That's right. And so what is so much more disappointing is because I tend to rely on established media sources. So when a Mike Florio is, and I apologize for being gross here, but when he's pulling stuff out of his ass, it's so disappointing. And the Jason Lock-and-Fours and stuff, they're making stuff up. It's so obvious that they are.
He had an article that he had in, today. The articles that are supposedly read the most are in that group of headlines on the front page.
Right.
Well, he wrote a thing today that Aaron Rodgers is going to be pissed off now because Gutekunst said, I never promised him I'd trade him. And he says, according to a source close to the situation. Well, that's according to Mike Florio, because he dropped it from that main thing like within 30 minutes.
Oh, interesting. And he didn't offer a retraction on Twitter or anywhere else. That's another thing that bugs me about these guys. When they're wrong about something, they just remove it and don't address it anymore.
No, they're never held accountable.
Florio says the NFL wants an AFC team in Chicago. You know what?
Yeah, okay.
I kind of agree with that. Not agree with it, but I asked a question on Twitter. Would you like to see a second Chicago team? Because then having two NFL teams in Chicago could pay for a $3 to $5 billion stadium at Arlington Heights, just like the SoHi Stadium is. You needed two teams in order to afford that state-of-the-art complex. So I can kind of see that this market is big enough for two NFL teams. But
I just, they were a two-team market years and years ago.
Yep.
I can't see it. I think it ends up hurting. There's a lot more people in New York and New Jersey than there are in Chicago, even though there's a ton in Chicago. Chicago is a Bears town.
It's true.
And I just can't see that ever happening. And I can't see the Bears ownership letting it happen because they'd have to let it happen.
Oh, well, and the only way they might let it happen is if they say, it would be nice to have another team here because that way we could get the stadium we want and we may not have to
they're going to get the stadium they want.
You think they are?
Sure. Why wouldn't they? They're going to get what's it cost them? The price they offered, obviously it hasn't closed yet, was like $198 million, right?
Right.
Okay. So they're going to have a section of that 326 or 327 acres is going to be the stadium and parking. That isn't going to be anywhere close to 320 something acres. Okay. And all the rest is going to be whatever they build up, be it a casino, hotels, restaurants, and everything else. They're going to either lease or sell that property. Right. They're going to get their $200 million back from that they're paying for that property on the sale of that land, because with that stadium there, that property became that much more valuable. That's my thinking anyway.
Well, it's good thinking. And do you think that the Packers would have objections to that too? Because it might eat into their lower Wisconsin population fan base. I would think that.
I don't know. I don't know if Green Bay would enter into the equation.
Mm-hmm. It's because they're not far away. I mean, that drive to Lambeau.
Well, they're not far away from where I live. They're farther away from people that live in the city.
Right.
Well, I can get to the Green Bay Stadium in 2 hours.
Yeah, that's about what it takes me. I mean, I go 90 miles an hour, so maybe that's why it takes me the same amount of time.
Okay, I'll tell you a funny story then. That you just
please.
We now I only live 11 miles from the Wisconsin border.
Mm-hmm.
So we were playing up in Green Bay, and Ted Phillips, Cliff Stein, myself, Bobby DePaul decided to drive up Sunday morning together for the game. So I had to go, south 10 miles to Hallis Hall, and I think we took my car, and no, took Bobby's car. So we're driving up, and we're like 2 or 3 miles into Wisconsin, and you know how they've got that little side roads, that run parallel to the 94.
Sure.
The cops hide in those things, and they're not right on the highway with the radar, and they're usually local cops, not state cops.
Okay.
We were 3 miles into Wisconsin, if that. And Bobby got pulled over for speeding. And I guarantee you that we're going to get all these Illinois people coming up, and they're going to be speeding to get to Green Bay. And this is at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. Yeah, there are famous.
So they're, you be careful with your 90 miles an hour, because they're there.
Yeah, I know. I've got
and the speed limit then was 65 and 70 now in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I was actually exaggerating. I know I don't go 90, I go 85. There was one other question I want to ask. Oh, yeah. The other day, I saw the movie Draft Day again with Kevin Costner and so forth. Isn't that the most ridiculous movie ever made about pro football?
I don't know if it's the most ridiculous, but they're like, decisions aren't made on draft day.
I know.
And your decisions are made before that.
Exactly.
And, there was no scouting department or anything like that. You had the coach and it wasn't real. And one of the trials that I had to do for my little side job, and this one it wasn't a deposition, it was in court. So there was a judge there, and during one of the breaks he goes, "Was that movie real?" No.
No way. Here's what is hilarious about it. All right. On the day of the draft, he learns, or maybe he doesn't learn, but there's this personal crisis going on that his girlfriend, who he has been hiding from the public, their relationship, is pregnant. And so he's got to deal with that. On top of that, his mom wants to bury his dad's ashes on the field hours before the draft. And she's got to know this might not be a great idea to do this today. So aside from that, those personal things, he gets into his car and he's got the 7th overall pick in the draft. And he gets a call from the guy who's got the number 1 overall pick. And during that phone conversation on the car, he decides to make this trade without informing anyone else in the organization. Now, how true is that? Well, wait a minute. That did happen with John Fox and Ryan Pace. He didn't tell him that he was drafting Mitchell Trubisky, so maybe there is some truth to that.
Well, in most cases, it's
so fake.
It's not true.
It is so fake.
I mean, because you always, and I hate the word collaborate, but you always collaborate.
Yes, it really is. I mean, you have to collaborate.
You talk these things out.
Yes,
and one of my jobs was to be the devil's advocate.
He'd be good at that.
Just to, and it's not necessarily what I believed, but just to throw, but wait a minute, how about, and make sure you walk through the scenario and you got all the questions answered.
You got to have somebody like that on your team of decision makers. You've got to have the contrarian. And just like you said, you may not believe the questions, the counterpoints that you're offering, but they have to be discussed. By the way, you're being called by a number of people the Yoda of scouting. Do you know who Yoda is?
Yoda.
I believe
Star Wars.
I believe this. I would rather call him the Obi-Wan Kenobi of coaching. You could play that Alec Guinness role in the new Star Wars movies. You could be.
Do I look that old?
No, you don't. But you look that smart, and you're in great shape. You can beat the shit out of Luke Skywalker.
Well, that wouldn't be that hard.
I love it.
Unless he had a lightsaber or something.
All right, I got to get to work. I got to finish this deal.
I thought this is work.
Greg. Yeah, I got to get to the other job. I owe you some paperwork. I will get it to you soon. I promise. Yeah,
right.
And I want to let people know that we got more programming coming up today. I think we're doing a Crosstown Crosstalk at 2 p.m. And then later tonight, we're definitely doing a draft on tap with Danny Shimon and Neil Stopchinski. One of the players they're going to look at is the kid from Purdue, the wide receiver, the big wide receiver, David. Is it Bell or isn't it David Bell?
Bell, rather. Bell. Yeah. I really know who he is.
No,
he's A-Rob.
He's A-Rob. A-Rob with a little more speed, maybe?
That's the comp, and he's got the same agent.
Nice. The
Brandon
same
Park.
agent. That'll be fun. So, I mean, hopefully there's a whole new relationship with A-Rob's agent and that he's not going to walk if the Bears draft Bell. That Brandon.
That had more to do with Joey Lane and how they were using, how they refused to use A-Rob this past year, and Joey Lane during the contract negotiations and anything else.
Do you think that there's any chance at all that the Bears purposely tried to avoid game plans that relied on A-Rob because they were upset at him or his agents? Do you think that's possible?
I would hope not. I know that's what they think, but I would hope that's not true. I mean, that's cutting off your nose to spite yourself. I mean,
yeah. Tony the Pod Boss asks, do you think there's any chance that they would tag A-Rob and then try to maybe deal him?
No, you don't have the money because he's got to get if you tag him again, he's got to get like a 20% raise over his last year. So he'd be up over $20 million a year.
Yikes.
He'd go up. What was it? What was his tag? 17.8 million
last year. Yeah.
Okay. So that's 1.78 million times 2 would be his raise. So it's roughly 3.5 million. So that, he's up near 22, maybe a little over $22 million, around $22 million.
Yikers.
Not a chance in hell.
And there you go, Tony. Answer to your question, and we will answer more questions in a week's time. We're targeting Tuesday the 8th for our next show. I want to thank Greg, Gabriel, and everyone else, the over 200 people that joined us here on YouTube and the several hundred that joined us on Twitter. Thank you all very much for tuning in. We will catch you next week, and don't forget, Draft on Tap tonight, 8 p.m. Take care, everybody.
See you later.